Look forward to. And then we will kick things off if that is okay with everybody. So just firstly to thank everybody for coming, and particularly thanks to the speakers. So Diana is one of our first speakers who here, and she represents Al-Haq, who is an organization who is a Palestinian NGO and has worked on Palestinian human rights for a long number of years. So I'm going to hand over to Diana in a second now, but I just wanted to say as well, before I do, just what my interest is in this area and why I hope that this is going to be a useful and productive discussion for us to have. So I guess for me, I was worked on my introduction to issues around Palestine, or my most substantial introduction was a number of years ago when I was working with the YWCA in Ireland, who partnered with the YWCA in Palestine to work on women's role in relation to peace building, and we facilitated an exchange of women, Palestinian women who came to the north and worked with women in the north of Ireland and kind of their shared experiences in peace building projects and peace work. And that was an incredibly a really, really interesting experience, and a very one that I found I got an awful lot out of. I learned an awful lot about our history of peace building in Ireland, as well as in the experiences of women in the context of Palestine. And I think particularly this last week, I think there's been so much discourse that we've seen brought up. Some of that discourse has been quite problematic in some ways, that we've sort of seen the discourse would almost justify some conflict or justify some deaths or some human rights violations in a way that would justify our kind of outrage at others, or our disproportionate outrage in different contexts. And I think we've seen a lot of, I think that it's churned up an awful lot for people. I think it's an important time that I think we have places and spaces to come together and to discuss the lessons we take from the conflicts around us, and to how we look to strengthen our support and our solidarity in meaningful ways for where conflict is emerging. So Palestine is one that is very close to the hearts of, I think, a lot of Irish people and a lot of people who have experience with and in Palestine. And I think it's just an important one that for us to learn or take the time to kind of take stock, take some lessons from it. And also what I'm hoping we will get to at a point at the end of this meeting, which I'm hoping we'll be finishing up around 8 o'clock, will be to have identified a few practical steps for us as activists, as for some of us as Green Party members, and for some of us as political representatives, or people who are engaged in the political process in different ways, to say what is it that we take forward in order to further our solidarity with Palestine and the lessons we can take from our solidarity with Palestine to other situations and other contexts. So that's my question, and that's what I'm hoping the discussion will be framed around this evening. But I'm going to hand over to Diana now, with a lot of thanks to her for taking the time to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today, and thank you for extending this invitation to Al-Haq to join such an important discussion. Allow me first to maybe give a short summary of some of the main violations that were documented by the Al-Haq team during last year, 2021. So last year marked a major setback for human rights in Palestine. The violations against the Palestinian people escalated, and according to our monitoring and documentation unit, the Israeli occupying authorities killed 84 Palestinians, including 15 children. In addition, 240 Palestinians were killed during the Israeli military offensive that was carried out on Gaza during May 2021. This included 60 children and 38 women, making the total number of the Palestinians killed last year 324. In 2021, Israel also demolished 233 Palestinian homes in the West Bank, including in Jerusalem. And during the military aggression on Gaza, 1,313 residential units were completely destroyed, and another 6,367 units were partially damaged. In addition to hundreds of other structures and vibrant infrastructures that were completely destroyed in Gaza. We have also witnessed a very alarming and alerting rise in the settler violence that is carried out against the Palestinians in the West Bank, but also inside the Green Line during the Unity Uprising in May. These attacks are carried out by the Israeli settlers and take place with full impunity, and sometimes with the presence of Israeli occupying forces on site. Now, for the past decade, the Israeli government, through its different ministries, but also in coordination with government-affiliated entities, have been leading systematic and carefully orchestrated disinformation and smearing campaigns against the Palestinian people and Palestinian civil society. These attacks also included death threats, travel bans, arrests, closure of organizations, and other forms of silencing efforts. In a more alarming step, and in October 19, 2021, the Israeli Minister of Defense declared Al-Haq and other 5 prominent civil society organizations as terrorist organizations. This unlawful designation have been designed to discredit the image, the efforts, and criminalize the work of civil society in Palestine. These designations targeted well-respected and known organizations for their work serving the Palestinian people. The work of these organizations expand to cover several important themes, such as the Israeli occupation, annexation, apartheid, and colonization of Palestinian lands, business and settlement activities, environmental and natural resources, political prisoners, refugees, and accountability before the International Criminal Court. Now, given Israel's prolonged culture of impunity, these unlawful designation and all these smearing campaigns against the Palestinian civil society have been used as a tool to silence, but to also further oppress the Palestinian people and any efforts to hold Israel accountable for its war crimes and crimes against humanity, its prolonged occupation, and its apartheid regime practiced over the Palestinian people as a whole. On this note, we urge the international community to put pressure on Israel to withdraw and rescind these designations, as they are acts of violations of freedom of opinion and freedom of expression, freedom of association, and amount to acts of apartheid. We have also demanded that countries would publish bulletins to banks and financial institutions to dismiss such inapplicable designation of the 6 Palestinian human rights and civil society organizations. It is not important only to support, but to protect the work of civil society and human rights defenders in Palestine. Since 1948, the Palestinian people as a whole have endured an ongoing Nakba of prolonged and sustained refugeehood, forced displacement, land appropriation, pillage, destruction of property, destruction of institutions, killing, also political, administrative, and geographical fragmentation, all of which are to eradicate Palestinians from their land and homes. And for over 7 decades, Israel's settler colonial project and apartheid regime has been maintained through a series of military orders, laws, policies, and practices, including the use of unnecessary and excessive force with the intent to dominate and oppress the Palestinian people. The UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination has highlighted that the Israeli society continues to be segregated as it maintains Jewish and non-Jewish sectors. One example of that includes the 2 systems of education with unequal conditions. Since 1967, Israel has extended the segregation and the apartheid regime over to the occupied Palestinian territory. This includes East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. This prolonged occupation is characterized by gross violation of human rights, by gross violations of international law, including land, sea, and air closure of the Gaza Strip, the annexation of Jerusalem, the construction of the wall, and the de facto annexation of parts of the West Bank. Now, parallel to this, Israel created 300 illegal Israeli settlements across the West Bank, including in East Jerusalem, and transferred over 700,000 Israeli Jewish settlers to the West Bank. Israel have used land appropriation as a policy and imposed administrative systems to preserve the fragmentation of the Palestinian people. This has shattered the Palestinian landscape into Bantustan-style cities and enclaves. Palestinians were divided into different classifications: nationals of enemy territory, protected population, holders of permanent residencies, citizenship minus nationality, refugees and exiles. This means that the Palestinians in Gaza, the Palestinians in the West Bank, the Palestinians in Jerusalem, the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the Palestinian refugees and exiles in diaspora are denied their freedom of movement, and they're denied their freedom to collectively exercise their rights and their right to self-determination. This fragmentation is intended to prevent them from collectively mobilizing against the colonization of their land. This engineering also aims to preserve the Israeli Jewish demographic majority in the historic and occupied Palestine, and also serves to establish Israel's de jure and de facto annexation of the Palestinian territory. On this note, it is long overdue that Israel is held accountable, and that the international community is no longer silent in the face of such grave violation of international law. The Palestinian people deserve to live in dignity. They deserve to enjoy the right to return to their homeland and to practice collectively the right to self-determination. It is time that people act to hold Israel accountable, and possibly some of the steps in the right direction could be to recognize the system practiced by Israel as an apartheid regime, but to also ban trade with Israeli illegal settlements in the West Bank. These settlements benefit the system of apartheid. They use Palestinian natural resources and stand against any serious development of the Palestinian people's economy and their practice of their collective right to self-determination. Thank you for having me again and for allowing me this space to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Diana. I really appreciate that input, and I think that was really valuable for everybody to give a really useful overview of the respective issues that are at play at the moment. Francis has joined us as well. So Francis, if it suits you, I would go to you now, or if you prefer, we can go to Patrick next either. You're muted there.
Yeah, sorry, Janet. Thanks so much. I don't mind going now, whatever is handiest. I'm just kind of getting my bearings here sitting at the computer. So I don't know, Patrick, if you want to go, I'm fine.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So Alex has decided to join me. Her mom's out working, so myself and Alex are here. Yeah, no, listen, thanks very much.
Patrick, will I just just mention to people, so what I'd ask Patrick to talk about as well is, as anybody who will have had a chance to spend more than about 3 minutes in Patrick's company will know, Patrick is very passionate about issues around Palestine and justice for Palestine. And also, but obviously, you know, in the Green Party, we've not been able to advance the policies that we felt we wanted to advance regarding Palestine within the government. I think that's safe to say for everybody here. And I guess it's important to kind of reflect on that and to understand a little bit better, I guess, where maybe where the limitations lie and where the opportunities lie as well. If there are opportunities to, like, it is not good enough for any of us to say we didn't get what we wanted into a program for government, so we just say we're not doing anything in relation to Palestine, and we just kind of let it fall off the agenda entirely. We want to keep it on the agenda. We want to keep justice for Palestine as part of our commitment to our international solidarity, but yeah, but we recognize that maybe we haven't got that in the way that we would have ideally wanted to. So I thought Patrick would be important to give some space to reflect on, I guess, what you see as the limitations, what you see as maybe the opportunities, and a little bit of a kind of perspective check from inside. I think what you described earlier today is the belly of the beast.
No, thanks very much. Thanks very much. Yeah, no, I think like one of the things that struck me is, or I was thinking of this morning, was during the debate we had for the program for government, NASA was one of our lead negotiators, and there was a question and answer session. And very early on, somebody asked a question, what happened to the Occupied Territories Bill? To which NASA replied, Simon Coveney happened. And I think that, you know, expresses neatly some of the frustrations of being in government. And like, look, I'm not going to go down talk about necessarily the Occupied Territories Bill. You know, I'm sure Francis is the expert there, but look, for me, it's very frustrating. I think I'm going to, my thoughts on this are quite all over the place at the minute, because I cannot look at what's happening in the Ukraine without thinking about this, and without thinking about the importance of international law and ensuring international law has some enforceability. You know, Diana talked about the lack of accountability for the crimes against humanity and for breaches of international law. And what we are seeing in Eastern Europe is the consequences of that, where others think they can get away with it. So I guess, like, look, if Simon Coveney has happened and the minister isn't going to support the Occupied Territories Bill, what else can we do? Now, look, there was, of course, the motion on annexation. Now, this was very much a cross-party thing. There were lots of other parties involved in this. You know, Sinn Féin were very instrumental, as well as Simon Coveney, as well as some of the NGOs in making that happen. It was a very positive thing. It was a very important symbolic, you know, PR victory. We were the first people in Europe, countries in Europe, to say this is, you know, officially the government to recognize this as annexation. Now we're into a similar thing where, you know, what are the consequences of that? So there's an element where government moves very slowly, but there's an element where we need more action. You know, we're making these decisions, we're making these calls. So what is the logical consequence of this? And the frustrating thing in general, and in Palestine in particular, but in general, is that, like, we don't seem to have any enforcement when it comes to international law. So what we're facing up to as well in terms of being in government is you have an awkward situation where, you know, a lot of these decisions are being made by a minister who's not in our party, who doesn't necessarily share some of our outlook. So for me, it's about trying to find, well, where are the other angles that you can use here? And I think for me, there are things like, I brought a complaint to the Advertising Standards Authority of Ireland in relation to Airbnb. Now, ideally, we would have some sort of decent human rights legislation where Airbnb cannot advertise or rent out apartments in occupied territory. You know, that is trade with the settlements. That is cementing their place in occupied Palestine and, you know, directly supporting them. But they advertise in Airbnb as being in Israel, which, you know, the international consensus and international law says they're not. So I've gone off and filed a complaint that they're, you know, false advertising. Now, the Advertising Standards Authority of Ireland is a enigma and is very, it's been 18 months and, like, we have barely got an update out, you know. But for me, that's one little aspect. So it's kind of like, what else can we do? What exists at the minute? You know, we've had recently Alstom who've provided the trains for some illegal settlements, getting contracts here. You know, so look, why, you know, can we do something about, my current thing is, can we do something around our procurement law? So I'm researching into this. Procurement law is a very difficult and litigious sector of law. So if anyone on the call is a procurement lawyer, give me a call. I've borrowed a €400 textbook from the library. I'm trying to battle my way through it. But the thing is, like, you know, if somebody is like, there are limits to what you can do in terms of the limits you put on procurement law, and they're based in European. And again, they're all very litigious. But the thing is, if someone is involved in a criminal enterprise, we shouldn't be giving them contracts. We should not be allowing them to bid for contracts. And this thing is, Simon Covey himself says the settlements are a criminal enterprise. This is the official position, that the settlements are illegal in international law. So, you know, the next question is, well, where is the consequences for that? And where's the consequences for people who are facilitating it? So if I was involved in another criminal enterprise in a domestic setting, I would sincerely doubt that I would be getting any government contracts. So, you know, I think we need to look at how we reform procurement law. And it's challenging because a lot of the procurement, you know, it's policy, it's not necessarily legislation. So decisions are made by the minister sitting at the cabinet table. So, you know, being a backbencher, I'm unfortunately not sitting at cabinet table. So it's about persuasion rather than necessarily forcing. Now, look, the thing is, and apologies if I'm meandering here a little, like, I look at the work that Glas, the Global Legal Action Network, are doing in relation to Western Sahara. And they've brought various challenges to San Jose Oil, who are based here in Ireland, who are involved in resource exploitation of occupied Western Sahara. So again, you know, and again, the Swahili and the Frente Polisario are bringing lots of cases to the European Union in relation to this, that kind of echo the differentiation that we're supposed to be doing between Israel and the occupied Palestine, and excluding anything that is occupied Palestine from any agreements we have with Israel. So again, you know, that differentiation and trying to find ways to exploit that and pull things out of that. You know, I spent time falling down a rabbit hole of PQs and FOIs around how the revenue operates our dual taxation treaty with Israel in relation to the settlements. Strictly speaking, under the rules that we've set, if somebody is trying to claim the benefits of this dual taxation treaty who is ordinarily resident within an illegal settlement, that they are excluded from the benefit of this treaty because it's not Israel. And that's what the state says. But in practice, there seems to be very little enforcement of that. Now, I think I've got as far as I can go, unless a whistleblower in revenue is listening who wants to send me over some stuff, you know. But in terms of my parliamentary questions and my FOIs, you know, the actual checks to see if we're doing that don't seem to be non-existent. It appears to me that once the Israeli tax authorities approve it, then it's approved. But the Israeli tax authorities are never going to say, oh, well, you know, they have a different understanding. They have a claim that these are part of Israel when they're not. So we're not, essentially, we're not enforcing the law, but it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So, you know, these are, I again, apologies if I'm kind of rambling, but these are different ways that I've been trying to find any sort of lever, whether it comes to differentiation, whether it comes to consequences for the illegal activities or supporting illegal activities, to just try and lever things a bit more. The way Irish politics is, a lot of the big decisions are only available if you're sitting at the cabinet table. And I think I annoy you. Anyway, let's not talk about me and the Supreme Court. But anyway, you know, I'm doing my best as someone on the outside. And I think that's probably there's a lot of people who won't like me saying that because they'll see me as a party of government and I'm on the inside. So while I'm on the inside of the party of government, I'm still outside cabinet, and that creates its own dynamics and frustrations. I think one of the other things that's really important that I think, again, we all need to do is the work of solidarity and the continuing support. Like, you know, so twinnings, tree planting, street namings, these things have symbolic support. They have an emotional uplift. They help raise awareness, things like that. They're not necessarily going to change it, but they certainly make it harder for politicians to say, no, we're not going to do anything. So they are very important in building a grassroots movement, and they are very important to, and I know this from my time in Palestine, that even these symbolic things do feed into that steadfastness of the Palestinians and help support them in their steadfastness. So I think all of these things are still important, and these are, as someone who's an insider but also an outsider, these are the kind of things I'm trying to do. And I'll probably leave it there because I'm rambling a bit. So I'll let questions come at the end.
Thanks very much, Patrick. And I think, yeah, one of the things I think is really useful to zone in on a little bit is that idea of Western Sahara as a very comparable context where there is illegal occupation ongoing, and it also, I think, demonstrates, because I think the last meeting that we had where we discussed Western Sahara, the first question that came was, what's going on in Western Sahara? Why have we not heard about this? And it also illustrates that there is this kind of significant inequality in the context and the conflicts that we hear about and that we get reported on, and the ones that we don't. And when we have enforceable mechanisms, which is what the Occupied Territories Bill would and could be, it allows that kind of objective enforcement mechanism, so we don't necessarily have to wait till things are in the news before we decide that we want to move in them. There is a mechanism there that says, like, we're able to kind of react when there's an objective injustice happening. So I'll move to Francis next as well, and yeah, just to say, I was very fortunate to work with closely with Francis for a few years anyway in the civil engagement group in the Seanad, and I know had seen the enormity of her commitment to this body of work, and the passion that she has for supporting the Palestinian cause as well. And so I am delighted that she's joining us as well, and thank you very much, Francis.
Thanks so much, Jana. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So yeah, thanks so much for asking me to come this evening and speak. Obviously, you know, for me, the Occupied Territories Bill has been something that's been very close to my heart for a long time. I introduced it. I first tabled the bill in 2018. And I worked alongside many different civil society organisations, and I suppose my goal, and it remains my goal, is to see Ireland become the first EU step to end trade in goods and services with the illegal settlements. And I just think it's vital that, you know, if we say these settlements are illegal and a barrier to peace, then we don't provide them with the economic support, and it's that simple. So yeah, I suppose I'm sure you probably are aware of the Occupied Territories Bill, but if you want me to go into a little bit of detail around it, I'd be happy to do so. You know, I actually went to visit Palestine back in 2018 as well, and I met with unbelievably amazing families, both in Gaza and in the West Bank as well. And you know, and I was very lucky to get into the West Bank because I had attempted to bring in the bill in the January of that year. I went out to I was able to get into Gaza, and I visited the West Bank and Hebron, and honestly, it's only when you go and visit and see it, and Patrick will agree with me, to see the reality, it stays with you forever, what the people are going through there. And you know, and there's no doubt about it, Palestinians are looking for you know, countries like Ireland to lead internationally on the occupation, and and the system of apartheid, which we all know now. Amnesty has brought out a report, which I might just touch on a little bit, Janet, if that's okay. But given our own history and our own diplomatic influence in the international community, I think, in light of this report, I think it's vital now that we act. And I think our inaction on this issue has become even more unjustifiable. We need to move beyond words of condemnation now. It's just not enough, and begin to take concrete action, and that, will finally bring peace and prosperity to all those people who are living in the region. So that would be my hope, and that is what my aim is. So the Occupied Territories Bill obviously is a bill that seeks to end Irish trade in goods, services and natural resources produced in the illegal settlements in the occupied territories. And that obviously includes the Palestinian West Bank. It would basically ensure that no Irish commercial activity sustains the illegal settlements. Now, it doesn't ban Israeli goods, which are unaffected. It's focused solely on goods produced in illegal settlements on Palestinian land, and it makes the same distinction as the EU and the UN between the two. And I think it's a very modest proposal. All it's doing is upholding laws, and as Patrick said, like these settlements are totally illegal under international law. And I'm going to say that again, Janet, if you don't mind. These settlements are totally illegal under international law. And that's, in essence, that's what this bill is about. The EU, the UN, the Irish government keep saying they're illegal. Everybody's saying it's illegal. And yet the settlements are continuing to be built and nothing is being done. And so, put simply, as far as I'm concerned, there has to be consequences for repeated breaches of international law, because I think it's total hypocrisy. How can we condemn the settlements as illegal and as theft of land and resources, but then buy the proceeds of the crime? So, by trading in settlement goods, we provide them with vital economic support, helping to sustain the occupation. And it's deeply inconsistent to say that we oppose the settlements, but then pay to support them. So, I suppose that's where, for me, like, I think that there's no doubt about it. The settlements undermine peace, and the Irish and the EU position is that settlements constitute an obstacle to peace and threaten to make a two-state solution to the conflict impossible. And this is obviously, when you look at the reality on the ground in the West Bank, they fundamentally undermine the possibility of a viable Palestinian state built on the land which it's supposed to exist. And that's the reality here. The settlements are not only the only factor in the peace process. Ultimately, peaceful negotiations are needed, but the settlements are the obstacle to peace that Ireland is actively involved in. And we can't support a peace process when we're financially supporting the obstacle to it. So, look, time is running out, and I think we must act. And I think, and I know around that time that we had, when all those discussions were going on, and, around the time of the programme for government, like, it was a very, very stressful time. And I know Patrick was probably very stressed as well. It was so disappointing, I suppose, that we didn't make it in to the programme for government. It was so disappointing. For me, I suppose, both Fianna Fáil and the Greens, didn't hold the line on the OTP, in the OTP on the programme for government as had promised, unfortunately. And I have to say that it was in their election manifesto. And look, this is an issue that's so close to my heart, and I just really believe that the Palestinian people deserve so much more, so much better. Look, I remember when I was sitting around a table in Gaza with a group of women who worked in one of the NGOs, and they were telling us about the work they were doing, but they were also telling us about the poverty and the deprivation and the no water, and the water being polluted, and their electricity only maybe coming on for 2 hours a day, and not knowing what time of the day. So the only way, when you're in a place like Gaza, for example, that's only half the size of County Louth. It's like and there's like 2 million people living there, in an enclosed area. It's like an open prison in huge deprivation, where their water is polluted, their electricity is cut off. And the only way they can communicate with people is through, phones and computers. and they don't know when their electricity is going to be turned off. So they're kind of have to stay in their homes to wait for the electricity to come on, because it come on at 11 o'clock at night. So they're waiting, or to do their washing, or to do whatever they have to do. I mean, it's a horrible way to live. And I remember these women saying to me, why are the international community doing nothing to help us? Why have we been abandoned? And that is the reality here. The Palestinian people have been abandoned, you know. So, you know, I suppose I was so happy. I warmly welcomed the Amnesty International's report on the situation, and, you know, and in the occupied territories. And, you know, I want to now, I think this report is a really powerful report that has resolutely determined, like, that Israel's institutionalized and you know, systemic discrimination against Palestine and the Palestinian people amounts to apartheid under international law, which is a serious human rights violation and a crime against humanity. And I just think this report lays bare in absolutely great detail, yet again, what Palestinians have said for decades, that they're living under a system of apartheid. And last year, Israel's biggest human rights organization, B'Tselem, they said the same. And, you know, and look, as a country, Ireland has stood for, you know, human rights, and we played such an important role in opposing apartheid back in the 80s. You know, I genuinely think that we have an obligation now to act, and I think that the government should urgently pass the Occupied Territories Bill, you know, and I think it's time now. And the other final thing I'd like to say, and if there's any questions, any detailed questions on the bill, I'd be delighted to answer. But I just want to talk a little bit about, and if you just give me a minute, I want to get it up here. It's the European Citizens Initiative, which is a really, really important initiative that has just come out since last week. And so the European Citizen, it's calling for a law at a European level that will end trade with illegal settlements once and for all. And this law will apply to occupied territories anywhere, such as the occupied Palestinian territory and Israel's illegal settlements here. And the law will also send a powerful signal around the world that the EU will no longer reward territorial aggression with trade and profits. And that, I'm reading that off the Cllr website. And what they're trying to do is get 1 million people to sign a petition across Europe, you know, to protect the families and communities who are living in the occupied territories. And I think it's really important that, so Ireland has to get 10,000 signatures. I think at the moment, it only came out last week, and I think we're almost halfway there. I actually think we could go to maybe 50,000, because the Irish people are so supportive. You know, when I was bringing in the Occupied Territories Bill into the Seanad, I held a host of public meetings around the country, and I cannot tell you how many people, like in Cork alone, there was people turned away like there was 300 people in the room, and there was people, because the hotel, this is now back in 2018 when there was no COVID, there was no more room. The hotel just said, no, we can't. They were standing around. There was a huge, and it was the same everywhere. It was the same in Dublin. We travelled all around. We were over in Galway. We were down, and we did one in Kerry. We did all over the country, and everywhere we went, the meetings were packed out. People wanted to know, what can Ireland do to make a difference? So this can make a difference. This European Citizens Initiative, which is, you know, it's a wonderful initiative, and I would encourage everybody and anybody to just spread the word, because we really need to get this petition signed, and we need to get the 1 million signatures on it. So I think I've covered everything, and if there's any other questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. Thanks a million. Thanks everyone.
Thanks a million, Frances, and you've answered what my first question was going to be. Sorry, I'm echoing back on myself. My first question was going to be to what is one thing that you want people to do, I guess, and bearing in mind that there is we're here as people first and foremost. We're here, some of us here as representatives, whether local, national, Seanad, TD, Dáil, and just so I guess it's what's something that we can do. So that's one thing, and I guess that would be also my question that I would ask for Diana and Patrick as well. And then also I'm hoping that people might stick their hands up if they want to come in with their own questions too. But yeah, what I would be keen to, so I'm going to keep an eye. I'm not told. Anyway, I'll keep an eye for hands up. But and please, anybody just come in. But if there's if Diana or Patrick, if you have any thoughts, and just given, and particularly maybe Diana, that an audience of here that does include representatives from different levels of Irish political representation and a lot of politically engaged individuals as well. What is the action points?
Thanks again. I guess for us is we are coming up with a new report also on apartheid, and as Frances mentioned, it's been circulated now more in the media after the Amnesty report, and to use apartheid regime to describe the situation in Palestine is gaining more momentum. So I think it's important to continue that momentum and push for such a recognition. Terminologies are important, and the narrative change globally is very important when describing the situation in Palestine and what's happening to the Palestinian people. Our analysis does expand beyond the analysis used in Amnesty report, because we do describe the situation also as a settler colonial project that is in Palestine. We definitely welcome the European initiative to ban the trade with settlements, and I've shared the link. We were also active in circulating the material in the toolkit on our social media. I guess these are my 2 points for now, but definitely to push for a narrative change on what's happening to Palestine, because we believe that a narrative change is really important before further steps are taking place. For people need to understand what is really happening on the ground in Palestine. And as Patrick mentioned, and also Frances, when people come to Palestine and see the reality on the ground, they change their perspective and relate better to what's happening. And we at Al-Haq are more than happy to organize a parliamentary delegation to take place in Palestine. If this is something that you guys are happy to organize back in Ireland, we are more than happy to organize it in Palestine. Thank you.
I might just jump in there very briefly. I obviously was clearly deeply unprepared for this meeting, because when Frances just kept talking, I kept thinking, oh, I meant to say that. Oh, I meant to say that. But yeah, going like with the European Citizens Initiative, it's exactly like Simon Coveney's line. 1 second. 1 second. One of Simon Coveney's lines is like, look, this legislation needs to be done at a European level. The European Citizens Initiative is doing that at a European level. So, you know, I think we should all write to him and say, look, this is doing what you want. Are you going to sign this? I think that could be useful. One of the other things I'm involved in is an interparliamentary association between Israel and Palestine. So Frances runs an Oireachtas Friends of Palestine, which is gathering like-minded TDs who want, action in this area. The thing I'm involved in is parallel but separate. There is about building links with members of the Palestinian parliaments, the PLC, the PNC. So, we had an initial meeting there the other day, and everyone was like, well, when are we going to Palestine? Because we all assume we're going to Palestine to organize that parliamentary visit for lots of reasons. A, to bring attention to it, but also the importance of, the importance of solidarity, and B, bringing people who've never seen it before to see what life is like on the ground. just in terms of other things people can do, look, the embassy is very happy to help and support in terms of, say, twinning, in terms of solidarity action. We have 6 NGOs who are, you know, are under attack. So fundraising, helping at that. You know, Al-Haq do excellent work that I know I've relied on my advocacy. So there's lots of really good organizations who need money to keep doing the work that they're doing. And indeed, many, you know, there's an attempt to deliberately attack and undermine them and strip them of that money. So look, yeah, a bit of fundraising is no harm either. So yeah, they're the couple of things that come to mind. You know, if you're a member of the union, get working with your trade union. There's a trade union, Friends of Palestine. If we look back at the Duns workers in apartheid, we know how powerful they can be. So yeah, you know, like there's, no matter where you are, there is something you can do to link to something that is happening in Palestine. Whether that is even, say, with schools doing a video conferencing between children here and children there. I know there was a program in Sweden that was doing joint classroom things. So like, yeah, you know, look at where you are, and there's bound to be something creative. There's bound to be an NGO or a group working in Palestine doing the same thing. There's a clown school in Nablus, you know, get fundraising for them, bring them over here, go over, volunteer with them. There's lots of things you can do. And even if it's a small thing, to build solidarity and to show, to support the spirit of steadfastness of the Palestinian people. Just, yeah, you'll find it. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so we'll stop.
Thanks, Patrick. Francis, do you back in?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in there just to say that like the Occupied Territories Bill is not gone, by the way, just to say that it's back on the order paper, actually, in the Dáil. So, you know, and with this report that we have, this amnesty report that's out, it's quite a powerful, as I mentioned, quite a powerful report. And like, there is going to be a campaign, an anti-apartheid campaign starting up again. So I would encourage you to get involved in that campaign. And, you know, as I mentioned to you about our public meetings around the country, and the interest from the Irish people, and there is a huge interest in this, when those meetings are happening, I would encourage you to let people know. You will see, you know, posters, you will see different things happening around the anti-apartheid campaign. And it's all really in relation to putting pressure again on the government to support the Occupied Territories Bill. It's still there. It's not gone away. What happened in the 80s was 2 women in Dunn's stores refused to handle oranges that came from South Africa. That's how it started, you know, and it was the people. We were actually in the exact same situation. The government wouldn't support legislation around African, the apartheid situation there. And we're in the same situation, but it was the people, you know, who really got behind that. And I think the people can do that again. And that's my intention. I'm going to be working with lots of different NGOs on an anti-apartheid campaign with the aim of putting pressure on our government to get the Occupied Territories Bill passed. And I would look for support from you on that. I would really appreciate any support that we could get on that. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Francis. There's no hands going up, so I'm going to do another shout out for hands up. Otherwise, I'm going to keep asking my questions, which I don't know whether. But yeah, I feel one of the things that I want to sort of reflect on as well, and I think that is really useful, and I'm kind of keeping a note of the summaries of action so that we can kind of circulate after this meeting and share after this meeting just exactly what we do next as from our respective roles. And because I think too often anyway, we talk about these things and we talk about the issues at play, but we don't have the action points come with them. So I think it is important that we are marrying the discussion here with the kind of a few things we will take forward and that we can do on the back of this meeting. But I would say as well that one of my questions in the week that's in it, in the conversations we're having that's in it, as we're looking into a new a new phase of conflict in the world, and a global conversation around conflict and injustices that I find myself reflecting on some of my experiences in relation to working on Palestinian issues. As I said before, specifically around the idea of the UN Article 1325, which is around women's participation in peace movements and peace building, and the pivotal importance that women play in ensuring that peace is brokered, peace is built, and it is lasting and it is meaningful. And when we look at what's happening in the Ukraine at the moment, there is a fierce rush towards a very machismo response and point of engagement in the conflict. And one of the things that keeps coming up for me is that that element of kind of remembering that how pivotally important that participation, the presence and the engagement of women in conflict is. And that's something that I learned from my work with Palestinian women in that context, to take forward. And so, sorry, I've now offering my own perspective there, but I guess that's a question that I wanted to just bounce back to yourselves, maybe to finish on, which is just around what is it, what are the lessons that we can take from the decades of campaigning and working on justice in Palestine, and how we apply them to the conversations that are happening at the moment around the conflict in Ukraine, or the invasion of Ukraine, and maybe similarly, what are the lessons we take from this week and what we've seen happening this week that can inform how we engage or how we approach the work that we're doing in relation to Palestine. So I don't know, maybe that's too abstract a question, but that's the question that's been on my mind the last few days. I've been thinking about both this meeting and the conversations that are happening at a wider level.
I just jump in very quickly and say, like, I think it really exposes what happens when international law is not enforced, you know, in any meaningful way. And when one country gets away with impunity, everyone else thinks they can do the same as well. You know, if driving without a mobile phone or with a mobile phone in your hand is not enforced, everyone does it. Parking on the footpath is not enforced, everyone does it. You know, by enforcing something and ensuring that the rule of law is real and concrete, you actually strengthen everything. And, you know, we don't have that when it comes to international law. And that is, as Francis said, that's the Occupied Territories Bill is little more than make real what we're supposed to be doing under the Geneva Conventions already. So for me, it's about that. And look, that's a huge topic, and you can get into all sorts of academic navel gazing. And I, you know, get it away from that community feminist perspective that I think might provide a more interesting conversation. So I'm going to stop now instead of going down that rabbit hole.
I'll come in there, Janet. Yeah, and I'm just looking at the chat here, and I think, you know, Cormac McKay there. Cormac, you've hit the nail on the head. Firstly, let me say what's happening in Ukraine is heartbreaking. And, you know, like, my heart goes out to the people. I can't even imagine what it's like for them. And I suppose, as Cormac said, though, the solidarity, I suppose, that's just coming everywhere for the people of Ukraine. And Cormac says, I think in recent days, with the sanctions on Russia, just how effective trade bans are and how they could work here. And I think that's really hitting the nail on the head. You know, I wish that, I suppose, the Palestinian people could get that same solidarity, you know, and that same support. And I kind of feel sad about that, to be honest with you. There's a sadness in that as well. I mean, you know, because the solidarity that's happening for the people of Ukraine is powerful, and it's wonderful to see. I just wish it was the same for the Palestinian people. I don't know, and you know, they just feel so abandoned by the international community. And when I even think about that, I get sad, you know, because we have fought tooth and nail to get this bill passed. We really have, and we nearly had it passed. You know, I mean, I think it took me about 3-4 months to get over the fact that it didn't make it into Programme for Government. But what did, I suppose, just to be, you know, what did make it in the Programme for Government, and I was really happy. I actually, at the, you know, up to the last hour, when I realised that the bill wasn't going to make it into the Programme for Government, I sent this text to see if it would be agreed to one of the Fianna Fáil people who were involved in the negotiations. And they did put this in, and they committed to this. And the commitment was to work to ensure that all parties respect their obligations under international law, to oppose the maintenance and expansion of illegal settlements, and give leadership within the EU to oppose any annexation of territory in the West Bank, and that the government would regard any such moves as a breach of international law and would consider an appropriate response to them at both national and international levels. Now, the national, that final part is key. You know, while there's no, I suppose, hard commitment on the Occupied Territories Bill, there is a commitment to national action, and that's where we are today. So, you know, I won't give up on this bill, to be honest with you. I will fight till the end to work hard on every single way I possibly can on trying to get this bill passed. And there's still hope, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. There's still hope. So, yeah, so thank you. Thanks for the heart, Diana.
And if I could be so bold as to jump in there, that feeling you described, Francis, around Palestine is one I know well, but it's also like, I've started trying to do stuff in relation to Western Sahara, and people at least know where Palestine is and have a vague idea of the conflict. And, you know, we had boots on the ground until very recently. We had UN peacekeepers from the defense forces in Western Sahara, but we stopped that. The 2 officers we had are no longer going, you know, so the points of leverage and ability to do anything in Western Sahara is drifting away, and half the time it's about just explaining where it is. But Western Sahara is a huge resource-rich country, huge in terms of resource. It controls something like 70% of the world's phosphate reserves. Like, that's particularly in an era of industrial agriculture. That's huge. It's got incredibly rich fishing resources. And these are things that are being exploited by Morocco. And these are things that will be supported by the Occupied Territories Bill. So, you know, what's the best thing I can do on Western Sahara? It's get the Occupied Territories Bill passed. It will support that too. And then you start adding other places and other places and other places. Now we had talked about Crimea before, now it's the rest of the Ukraine, you know? So yeah, it's so big. The Occupied Territories Bill is so much bigger and so much more important. So yeah, thanks, Francis. I'm sorry.
Okay, and Diana, would you like to, could I maybe move to you for a last word? If you have any thoughts on any of the questions or issues raised out there.
The recent events in Ukraine, it's really sad. I was watching news all of yesterday and I was like furious. I was just angry at you know, all these news statements and different statements made by different officials. You know, it just exposes this kind of hypocrisy. As a Palestinian and also as an Arab coming from a Middle Eastern country, I don't know that we're not white enough, that our human rights are less because of that. You know, international law and human rights are universal. They're applied to everyone, regardless of their race, nationality, gender, etc. It is very sad what's happening in Ukraine, but it saddens me also that the world chooses to apply international law in specific cases and not to everyone. I was watching these news, kind of unravel even before these last 2 days, and you could see they're talking about mother of all types of sanctions being imposed on Russia before any of this happened. I mean, obviously there has been annexation and also occupation before that, but it puzzles me. Why is this now? Why is international law so important all of a second? When for decades long, Palestinians, we've been screaming about international law violations happening to us, and no one cares. I don't have the answers. I don't know why. But it's not okay. And Palestinians have been watching. We have been watching and wondering and taking notes and learning from these past 2 days as well. I hope we all, you know, get to the point where we see humanity and human beings all as a collective, beyond these borders imposed on us, beyond these nationalities and beyond everything that has been imposed on human beings, separating us. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. I think, yeah, I thank you for saying all of that, and I think it's a really important and powerful issues that I think is so important to reflect on. And we're all watching things unfold at the moment, and I think it's having certain important questions in mind as we are watching the current events unfold is so important, and I think you raised some of those there. I think I will we'll just draw to a close at this point. I think
Janet, I think somebody wants to come in there.
Okay, yeah, Art.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Art O'Leary. I visited Palestine briefly about 4 or 5 years ago. There's a woman called Elaine Daly organises, and we visited Al-Haq while we were there. There's a woman called Elaine Daly organises tours a couple of times a year, a group called West Bank Tours, and I've just stuck her number there in the chat. So if anybody wants to go, she will be organising trips for people who go see. Just that.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thanks for organising this.
And yeah, I'm going to circulate around a few notes and the action points from this meeting, but I just really to thank, I think Patrick's had to knock off. I think he's got an urgent bedtime coming up there, and I just would thank you very much to Diana and Francis as well and I really appreciate your contributions, and I think very powerful contributions, and you know, with important points for us all to reflect on and for us all to bring forward in our respective roles as well. So I really do appreciate your time enormously, and your passion for the work and the work that you've been putting in for years on this area as well. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that, but just to say thank you to everybody for coming again.
Thanks, Janet. And can I just, because there is a question there in the chat that maybe Blaheen, just to say to Blaheen, I wish I had the answer to your question. You know, I don't know why the world turns away when it comes to Palestine. It's a really good question, but that is the reality. And, you know, the international community does turn its back on the people of Palestine. And we in Ireland, I believe, and I'll say this again, we have an obligation. We are the international community, and we have an obligation to do something really constructive and make a difference now. And I think Ireland can lead on this. I really genuinely believe Ireland can lead on this. But we need to get the people on board. We need to bring people with us. So I just didn't want you to think we were ignoring you there, Blaheen. Thanks a million, Janet, for organising this.
Janet, can I just add in just one last point? I mean, yes, I did emphasize Palestine because that's why I'm here in this meeting. But it's also sad what's happening in Yemen, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Western Sahara, in endless other countries and nations around the world. I just wanted to add that because it's not just Palestine and Ukraine. Thank you. And thank you again for having me. please reach out to Al-Haq. We're more than happy to share information. If you come to Palestine, please do call us, get in touch. We're more than happy to take you on a field visit and discuss with you and show you around.
Thanks very much, everybody. And yeah, I guess
Thanks, Janet.
thanks a million and good night.
Thank you.